The lawless hate riot that we saw on the streets of Montreal is what happens after 9 years of a woke prime minister pushing radical woke identity politics, dividing people by race, gender, vaccine status, religion, and more. On top of dividing, he erases our heroes and history, saying Canada has no core identity. He opened the borders to terrorists and lawbreakers. The results? Assassinations on Canadian soil, firebombings and terrorist attacks against places of worship, 251% more hate crime. It wasn't like this before this Prime Minister and won't be after he's gone. Why not an election so we can fix what he broke?
Let's go, baby. Let's get into it, though. Just because you spend more doesn't mean you get more. Pierre here on a radio show.
This is the question I have for people. Trudeau and the NDP Liberals have increased government spending by 85% in a decade. Are you getting 85% better federal?
85% in a decade. Hold on.
This is the question I have for people. Trudeau and the NDP Liberals have increased government spending by 85% in a decade.
My goodness.
Are you getting 85% better federal government services?
Yeah, that's a question that I think people can answer.
But just because something costs more
doesn't mean
that it's better.
Yeah.
You know, it's like saying, well, I went to the best restaurant in the Lower Mainland yesterday. Oh yeah, what was so great about it? Well, they charged me $1,000. It must be good because it was really expensive. Well, what about the ambiance? It was terrible. What about the food? It was awful. The service? Oh, we waited for hours, but it must be the best because we spent the most on it. That's the government mentality. We're judging success by how expensive things could be. Government should be cheaper than ever. With new technology, we should be able to deliver more and better services at a lower cost. But if you look at all the things government does, they're becoming more and more expensive to deliver worse and worse results. Look at housing. Trudeau spent $80 billion on affordable housing. And what's the result? Housing costs have actually doubled. You know, so just because the government is spending billions of dollars on a problem doesn't mean that it's going to get any better. In fact, the more government gets involved in our lives, the worse our lives become. We need less government and more freedom.
And this is why Canada needs a Department of Government Efficiency. We can cut a lot of the excess fat, a lot of the unnecessary government spending, and I think that would be fantastic. Be moving in the right direction by doing something like that, by getting our own Doge here in Canada. Fun fact, Trudeau's 2-month fake tax break expires 10 days before Jagmeet Singh's pension kicks in. Pierre proves Trudeau's tax cut is a trick. I actually didn't know this. 10 days before Jagmeet gets his pension. That doesn't shock me. Jagmeet always wanted his pension at the end of the day, his multi-million-dollar pension. Time and time again, he says he's for Canadians, but continues to throw them under the bus.
And today, what we have is a 2-month temporary tax trick that will not make up for the permanent quadrupling carbon tax on heat, housing, food, and fuel, and all to save Justin's job and Jagmeet's pension. Ironically, in just a few months, Trudeau and the NDP plan to raise taxes on all the same items they claim they're giving you a break on, directly through the carbon tax. They'll be raising taxes on heat, on gas, on everything that comes in a truck. If you got it, a truck brought it. And it will be more expensive with this carbon tax. They even plan to jack up liquor taxes in April, while they claim to be taking them off for the next 2 months. That sounds like a trick. A trick. Are you fooled?
Sounds like a scam.
You look like you're fooled. He can see the trick. Like he's even he's laughing. Nobody believes Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh after they've impoverished our people and made life worse off. The good news is there will be a carbon tax election.
That's just a simple fact of the matter. They say they're going to take away GST and HST on all of these different items. Well, the government is going to have to later somehow recover that money. They are not just going to allow 2 months of money to disappear without going harder on Canadians, whether it's through the carbon tax or whatever the case is. They implement some sort of new tax. It's only going to get worse. This is pretty funny. A hostile CP24 reporter tried Pierre on a one-on-one interview, and it went about how you'd expect. This is why I like Pierre, simply because he goes after the mainstream media. He's not afraid to battle the mainstream media face to face and call out their BS and lies.
I wonder what message you're sending to Canadians, Mr. Poilievre, when you say you're all about axing the tax. You're all about bringing taxes down, making life more affordable. And in the same breath, you say you're not sure you're going to support a tax break for Canadians at a time when they're struggling so badly.
Why are they struggling so badly? It's been 9 years that Trudeau's promised to make them better off. And here we are. You're right. They are struggling so badly. And I think your own words are a condemnation of his track record, with food prices rising 37% faster in Canada than they have in the United States, just as the carbon tax came in. Housing costs doubled. Here we are in Toronto, where you have to earn well over $200,000 to afford a home. That was never the case before Justin Trudeau ran money printing and immigration out of control, before he built up all these bureaucracies that block home building. Clearly, Canadians are struggling. Justin Trudeau is the problem. He's not the solution. What we need is a common sense plan for permanent tax cut.
And that's just the sad reality. Places like Vancouver and Toronto are the number 1 and 2 most expensive places to live in all of Canada. There will be no prediction on whether or not the prices will drop because Trudeau, like I said, he's going to do this 2-month break. The government is going to need to recoup that money. They're going to need to gain that money back in some way, shape, or form. Things are only going to get more expensive after this quote-unquote 2-month break. And then the Liberals want to say they're going to give you $250 in a few months. $250 after 10 years of Liberal government bending you over. I don't think that's really worth it now, is it? This is literally what happened this weekend. Trudeau was at a Taylor Swift concert while Montreal literally burned. Insane protests, with air quotations, protests took place, and it got extremely out of control. So yeah, a whole lot of not good going on there. Look at this guy look at him putting his peace signs up, having the time of his life while people are breaking into buildings and doing God knows what. Here's another couple videos we could go through.
Close. Close. This is us. You're first. Oh shit.
Yeah, absolutely wild, just out in force, literally like Antifa, essentially. And look, this is a comparison of what happened at the quote-unquote violent freedom convoy, the quote-unquote out-of-control protesters full of hatred at the freedom convoy.
Canadians were shocked and frankly disgusted by the behavior.
Disgusted by this man destroying this man in chess while having a little beverage outside of Parliament. Disgusted by this massive Canadian flag and these people hugging. What a vile act of free coffee for all, and donations will go to the convoy. This is vile, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen.
We won't give in to those who fly racist flags. We won't.
Yeah, what an absolute I can't believe that they were playing hockey in the street. That is just so not Canadian. But if we continue back to the weekend that just happened. Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah. As a matter of fact, the protests got so out of control that they ended up using tear gas and pepper spraying them. Yeah, you get what you deserve. Trudeau has not only ended up on the naughty list once, but he has actually ended up on the double naughty list after this weekend.
The lawless hate riot that we saw on the streets of Montreal is what happens after 9 years of a woke prime minister pushing radical woke identity politics, dividing people by race, gender, vaccine status, religion, and more. On top of dividing, he erases our heroes and history, saying Canada has no core identity. He opened the borders to terrorists and lawbreakers. The results? Assassinations on Canadian soil, firebombings and terrorist attacks against places of worship, 251% more hate crime. It wasn't like this before this Prime Minister and won't be after he's gone. Why not an election so we can fix what he broke?
Let's go, baby.
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, I personally believe that it is shameful that anyone would speak of the violence that took place on our streets here in Canada in political terms for purely partisan political intention. Mr. Speaker,
Out of touch.
It is all of our responsibility to stand up to such hatred and to condemn it in the strongest possible terms, unequivocally and on behalf of all decent Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After 9 years of this Prime Minister, he's doubled the cost of housing and increased the cost of food 37% more quickly in Canada than in the United States. And now he's trying to hide that. He's saying that, you might save 10 cents on a bag of chips, or you might be able to save on Halloween costumes after Halloween's already over, Mr. Speaker. So what has the Bloc got for keeping this Prime Minister in power? Nothing. Nothing for seniors. The leader of the Bloc Québécois, he speaks a big game, but he doesn't play a big game. Why not a carbon tax election so we can get rid of taxes and help people save real money? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, today we can really wonder who talks a lot and who does a lot, because today every member of this House has the right, the obligation to help Canadians, Quebecers, with a bit of help. So my question is, will the Conservative members have the right to vote for their constituents? The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
After doubling housing costs and inflating food prices 37% faster in Canada than in the United States, with inflationary carbon taxes and deficit spending, the Prime Minister now has a tiny 2-month tax trick that will save you 10 cents on a pack of chips, save you a few pennies on a Christmas tree, but only after your Christmas tree is already up and decorated. You'll even save on Halloween costumes 2 months after Halloween. Does he really expect Canadians to fall for this tiny tax trick just before he quadruples the carbon tax on heat, homes, gas, and groceries?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'm really glad the Leader of the Opposition started by comparing our economic position with the U.S. Because the fact is, in Canada, inflation is lower. In Canada, interest rates are lower. In Canada, deficits are lower. And in Canada, the public debt is lower. Let's stop talking Canada down. And when it comes to supporting Canadians, what I want to know is, will Conservative MPs be allowed to offer a tax break to their constituents? I know their constituents want it. That's what we're hearing from everyone.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this from a minister who, after finding out that the economy is entering its 6th consecutive quarter of shrinking per capita GDP, that's income per person, down, while the American income per person is up. After she learned that there are 2 million people lined up at food banks, 38% more chronic homelessness, 1,400 homeless encampments in Ontario after 9 years of this government. She says we're not in a recession, we're in a vibe session, she says. So what's her message to people who are hungry and homeless after 9 years of her government? They just need to get with the vibe?
Exactly.
Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Speaker, my message to the leader of the Conservatives is to be a little more economically literate. I guess he did look at the recent GDP revisions, the upward revisions in GDP that show a good result for Canada in per capita GDP. They also show that Canada has not had a recession, contrary to the predictions of many when we saw the COVID recession. We have had a soft landing. That's something to celebrate.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, allow me to remind you that the Bloc Québécois' useless measures, apparently, when it came to supply management and seniors, well, the young man who leads the Conservative Party, he voted in favour of those. However, when it comes to purchasing power in Quebec and Canada, there are measures that have been proposed, and there are measures that are going to be accessible to millionaires, and checks are going to be sent to people who, have high revenue, $150,000. Does the government not realize that it's abandoning those who really need help with these measures? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I take the Bloc Québécois' concerns very seriously when it comes to our seniors, and I take them seriously because our government shares those concerns. That is why our government has supported seniors across Canada more than any other federal government. This year, Canadian seniors will get $48 billion in support from the federal government. And that's fair because they deserve it.
I think all MPs should be required to take a cognitive test, but specifically Chrystia Freeland.
That you have to make is the one that people are making at home.
She needs to take it first. She needs to be first in line to take that cognitive test because she is just spewing some of the most ridiculous stuff I have ever heard.
For years now, and who are subject to discrimination and who don't have access to the vote-buying checks coming from the Liberal government. But listen, I don't understand how the Liberals supported the NDP to support them on this. I'd like to know how. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to start by clarifying one detail, and that's that I know that there are many seniors who are still working, and those who work will get the checks. I also want to say that I think that we all understand that seniors who are 75 years old and older are more vulnerable. They need more assistance, and that is why our government knows that we need to give them more support.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
You know what's cruel? The $250 check that's going out in spring,
You're
this
cruel,
Liberal government is
Jagmeet.
excluding seniors, people living with disabilities, and people who just started working. What a slap in the face. Why is this Liberal government excluding the most vulnerable in our country?
For the Honourable Minister response, I was going to ask members please to not take the floor unless they're recognised so that everyone can hear the question. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the NDP leader for his question, and I hope he and all members of this House will help work with us to unblock this Parliament and to get the support to Canadians that they need and deserve. When it comes to the Working Canadians rebate, we know that there are hardworking people across the country who have been through challenging times, and we know that now is the time to provide them with that extra support. I hope all MPs will join us in doing that.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. Workers desperately need help, like seniors, persons with disabilities, and young people who've just got their first job. And yet this government is excluding them from the $250 payment. This is a slap in the face. Can the Liberals explain to the most vulnerable Canadians why they're not supporting?
Every time he speaks, it's like a slap in the face.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to thank the Leader of the NDP for his question. And I hope that he and all members of this House will help us sincerely help Canadians. Our government understands the importance of supporting the most vulnerable, and that's what we've done starting in 2015, and we will continue to do that. Today, we understand that Canada's workers need help, and we are going to help them. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
The NDP leader is giving Canadians whiplash with his latest flip-flop and the flop on the flip. First, he said he tore up his deal with the Liberal government. Then he said that he had taped it back together because they had signed on to his 2-month tax trick. Now he rises on his feet to say that the trick is a ripoff of seniors and persons with disabilities. So then why won't he put his actions where his words are and vote for a carbon tax election so Canadians can choose between this 2-month trick and axing the tax for good?
It will be of no surprise I'm going to ask the Honourable Member from New Westminster Burnaby, please, not to take the floor unless recognized by the Speaker.
We'll see what happens, the first of many.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the only inconstant flip-flopper in this House is the Leader of the Official Opposition. For months, he has been talking about how Canadians need a little more support. But it turns out that unless you recite robotically his Dr. Seuss rhymes, he's not going to agree with your approach to helping Canadians. Now is the chance for him and his MPs to actually give Canadians some real support. Let's get together.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Speaker, the streets of a major Canadian city were set on fire this weekend, and the Prime Minister was nowhere to be found. A radical, anti-Semitic, anti-Canadian mob burned cars, smashed windows, assaulted police officers, and the Prime Minister was nowhere to be found. It took him until noon the next day, and he offered the most basic platitudes resembling some standard condemnation that he's been offering after fomenting the hatred that he's now surprised about. So I have one question. When was the Prime Minister told about the riot, and why did he decide to keep dancing the night away?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague, the Minister of Defence, I think properly explained the outrage that all Canadians felt at this wanton, reckless violence on the streets of Montreal. Mr. Speaker, we condemn unequivocally the rising and concerning rates of anti-Semitism and all other hate crimes in the country. We're working with provincial authorities, local police to combat this. And let me be very clear, Mr. Speaker, no matter what group you claim to represent or what cause you're advancing, if you're smashing windows and assaulting Canadians, you're a criminal and you'll face the full consequences of the law.
Again, I'm going to ask the member from Calgary. I'm going to ask the member from Calgary, Signal Hill, please, not to take the floor unless recognized by the chair.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. The pictures from the riots in Montreal have gone around the world, and it's shameful. We are reaping what the Prime Minister has sowed with his woke, divisive policies. He divided people by race, gender, religion, region, age, wealth, and so on and so forth. And as a result, we've lost control of our borders. We've let criminals come into Canada. Chaos has come in with them. Why is the Prime Minister dancing while Montreal burns?
Because he's an idiot.
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, I'll say again in French what I've just said in English. Our government, in every instance, condemns the acts of violence and the criminal acts that we saw on the streets of Montreal. It's completely unacceptable to put forward a political point of view by destroying Canadians' property, by committing assault, by attacking police officers. You're not demonstrating peacefully. In those cases, you are a criminal and you'll face justice.
Oh yeah, because the liberal justice system has been very good.
And yet, Mr. Speaker, for this Prime Minister, it's not enough that Hamas representatives are burning our city senators. He's opened our borders to terrorists and criminals, and he's called anyone who's questioned his policies a racist. Despite the Conservatives' demands to put the Islamic Revolutionary Guard on the list of terrorist entities, he's let them operate legally here for years, and now he's letting Hamas representatives destroy our cities. Why did the Prime Minister choose to dance when he knew that Montreal was burning? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, the RCMP is continuing to work in close cooperation with the good work that was done by the police service in Montreal. At all times, the RCMP supports its partners, whether that be in Montreal or in other regions of the country. We have criticized, and we will continue to criticize, the increase of anti-Semitic acts and hate speech acts in Canada, and we will remain focused on the support that we can give the forces of law and order, something that the Conservatives can't say.
The Honourable Member from Durham.
Mr. Speaker, for years, these Liberals have engaged in woke virtue signaling. They
Let's
have
go!
a hollow and superficial understanding of morality, more concerned with appearances.
The virtue signaling is high.
And Canadians clearly saw the consequences of liberal ideology over the weekend in Montreal when hate-fueled attacks overtook the cities. The Prime Minister is partying while Canadian cities are suffering. So I ask, why was the Prime Minister dancing while Montreal was burning?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for that question, because all Canadians in this House and all Canadians around the country detest and render unacceptable what we saw in the streets of Montreal. That kind of violence, that kind of unlawful behaviour, that kind of anti-Semitism is unacceptable and will never be countenanced. While we're talking about the fight against anti-Semitism, I will just put it to that member that we have legislation on the floor of this chamber that will take the ban on willful promotion of anti-Semitism and accentuate the penalties, taking them from 2 to 5 years. Will the member support that bill? It's called Bill C-63. It targets online radicalization, which is the root cause of what we're seeing.
Ah, yes, tying in everything to online radicalization.
The Honourable Member
yes.
for Durham.
This Liberal Justice Minister, just like his boss, the Prime Minister, refuses to take any responsibility for creating the conditions that led to what we saw in Montreal just a couple of days ago. It's this Liberal Justice Minister's DEI criminal justice policies that have allowed crime to go unchecked in our cities. It's this Liberal Justice Minister that won't lift a finger to do anything about the violence targeting religious communities in Canada. The Prime Minister is the problem. The Liberal Justice Minister is the problem. So I ask again, when will the Prime Minister stop dancing and address crime in our cities?
Great question.